So now you've heard the story of Thomas the Doubter, the one who didn't believe. But I'm going to tell you the story, the next bit, Thomas the Believer. Now the Bible doesn't mention Thomas again, but there is Christian tradition. That is, there is belief that Thomas went on to do something absolutely amazing. It is believed that he went all the way to Kerala in South India and on to Sri Lanka, all that way, telling people that Jesus was alive. It may be true. It's crazy, but it may be true. The first missionaries from Europe, when they arrived in India, all those years ago, about 500 years ago, they found a functioning church, believing that Jesus was risen. And that is incredible. Can you believe it? It just sounds incredible that someone would go 7,000 kilometres from Jerusalem here all the way down to Sri Lanka, and probably on foot. Do you know what? I used to think this was crazy, but when I've looked into it, it becomes a little bit believable. The other great missionary of his time was St. Paul, and he travelled 20,000 kilometres on his journeys around Syria, Turkey and Greece, eventually ending in Rome. He walked some of the way. Look, he walked in these places, but he also travelled by boat. And he went to Jewish communities. He first went there to tell them about Jesus, and he found that people would host him. And then he told the others as well. Thomas might have been doing the same thing. The Christians in Kerala, South India, down here, they believe that Thomas arrived around AD 52. That's about 20 years, after Jesus died. They think he arrived around then, getting to Sri Lanka about 20 years later. Now, it's possible because we know that Paul used those Jewish communities, and there were Jewish communities in what was then called Persia, the Persian Empire, Iran and Iraq. And we know that actually there were also boats that did trade across the Arabian Sea, across to Kerala in South India. So he may have gone on a boat. And it was probable that distance was not the problem. So what do you think the problems might have been for Thomas on a journey to South India? Well, the first thing is, how does he get the money? You need the money to travel, to buy food, to pay people on the way, to have shelter. So either he would have to ask for it, or he would have had to earn it. Well, we know that Paul did both those things, and he received hospitality as well. We know that Paul got money from backers, say for example in Philippi, to do his work. We know that Paul worked as a tent maker in order to support himself. So if he did that, Thomas may have found somebody to give him the money, to get on a boat, to take him on the way, and he may have had skills, a job that he could do while he was on the journey. So the next problem that he would have was staying alive. Thomas would have been in dangerous country where tigers and snakes roamed. Now, Indian cobras, they're very dangerous. But you know what is more dangerous than animals? People. People are very dangerous. We know that Paul was often imprisoned or beaten up. We might have found that people robbed Thomas. He might have been got sick and had no one to help him. They might find a stranger turning up in their village and their town and blame them for all the bad things that were going on. We know that Thomas would have been in danger from people. The next problem he would have found was language. How did he speak to the people? He wanted to tell them that Jesus was alive. But how could he do that when he didn't speak the language? He may have found people in Jewish communities were able to do something to help him. Or he may have had a really amazing ability with languages. But we also know that the Holy Spirit gave to the apostles, the close followers and friends of Jesus, the ability to be understood. But there's another thing. Communicating isn't just about language. It's also about culture. Discovering and understanding the culture, the music people listen to, the symbols, the stories. If you're going to understand Jesus, you have to understand what came before. You have to understand the stories of the Old Testament, of the people of Israel. And somehow Thomas had to understand other people's cultures in order to communicate the story of Jesus. So the first thing he needed to do was to listen, to hear. The first job of any missionary, anybody who wants to tell people about Jesus, is to listen. Thomas had to listen. Now, we know that Thomas succeeded, and it's really interesting how we know that. We know because of the St. Thomas cross. There are several ancient St. Thomas crosses in South India and Sri Lanka. They all have things in common, and they are there to explain what Jesus did, that he is alive. And they also do this in a way that uses Indian culture. Here's a diagram of that cross, and if you just look at it, you begin to understand what it means. First of all, you need to look at the base. Thomas used this to describe the first part of the story. The base symbolises the steps Jesus took to death, his walking to Golgotha. It also is there to describe 3 levels of Noah's Ark and the climb on Mount Sinai for Moses to get the Ark of the Covenant, the 10 Commandments. So Thomas used the steps to help the people understand Jewish culture and history, the story of the Bible, and the story of Jesus. The core of the story itself is the cross. And Thomas would have described how Jesus died. But the St. Thomas cross is always empty. Thomas knew that Jesus was alive. The St. Thomas cross is always empty. But there are 2 unique features to the St. Thomas cross that come from Indian culture. Firstly, the ends of the cross are not square. Most other crosses they are, but at the end of each is a flower. The cross is itself alive. Flowers are very important in the cultures of India and Sri Lanka, and the flowering cross helped Thomas explain how death turned into life. The most important flower in Hindu culture and Indian culture and Asian culture, Chinese culture, even across to Egyptian culture, is the lotus flower. The cross is set in the lotus flower. The lotus flower is not only a symbol of life, it's a symbol of resurrection. The roots of the lotus plant are deep under muddy, revolting, thick, oozy, black water. And every morning the flower emerges from the mud with its petals completely pure and beautiful. So the lotus flower was a very important religious symbol. It still is. It's very important for Buddhists, and here is a Buddhist statue, for the Egyptian religion, and for Hindus as well. The gods of the Hindus, the religion of South India and Sri Lanka at that time, the gods were often seated in the lotus flower, and they held lotus flowers in their hands. The lotus flower is an important symbol of new life, of resurrection. And Thomas would have been able to use the lotus flower to explain how Jesus was alive. The lotus flower declares that Jesus is God and he has come back to life. But how did he come back to life? Our last symbol is at the top, and it is symbol of the Holy Spirit. The Holy Spirit that brings Jesus back to life. So in Europe, Thomas is remembered as a doubter, someone who didn't believe unless he saw proof. He's held up as a skeptic and as a cynic, and someone who demands proof. In India and Sri Lanka, Thomas is remembered as a believer, someone who trusted in God who was risen. He is someone who believed in the power of the Holy Spirit and put his life in danger, travelled to far-flung places, was lonely and afraid at times, but had confidence that Jesus was alive. We can be like Thomas. We can be believers. If we are believers, we have a job to do. We need to tell people that Jesus is alive.